Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Bruin Dash, the UCLA show on Dash Sports TV. My name is Sam Connon. I'll be one of your two hosts today. I am joined once again by the wonderful Jack Perez. Jack, how you doing today?
I'm doing so good, Sam. I got a haircut. It's nice and 70 degrees out here in Westwood. Went for a walk. It's looking beautiful out there, and I'm so excited to be here with you.
It's great. I mean, the haircut, I noticed it when we were getting ready, but I wanted to save the compliment for when we're on the air. It's looking great. I'm trying to get a haircut later this week, so maybe you can let me know your guy. We'll hash that out later. But for now, let's get to UCLA men's basketball. A road split at the Mountain Schools. They picked up a win at Utah by 15 points. Pretty comfortable, good-looking win on Thursday. And they come back against Colorado. 35 minutes of really good basketball, back and forth. A lot of scoring by Johnny Juzang, like good team defense, whatever it is, and then turnovers down the stretch. Absolutely imploded. And they lose 70-61 at Colorado. So we'll be breaking down those games today. Pretty important in terms of Pac-12 standings, March Madness, bracketology, and all that. And we'll also be talking about this upcoming week, Oregon and USC, probably the two toughest matchups for UCLA of the whole year. I know they already played USC, but hopefully Cody Riley's back for this one, so it can be a little bit more even or a better representation of what this team is. We'll talk about that as well. And speaking of the USC game last time out, they didn't have Jalen Hill last time because of personal reasons, and that has still kept him away from the team. Chris Smith tore his ACL earlier in the season, so we'll be talking about those guys and how the Bruins have kind of adjusted and who they miss more between their two star players they're missing during conference play down the stretch here. So if you have thoughts or opinions, questions on any of those, leave them in the comments below if you're watching live, and we'll get around to them. So without further ado, let's break down this Utah-Colorado road stand or road trip. Jack, give me your first impressions, your biggest takeaways from the road split that UCLA had this weekend.
Well, obviously, really tough for any team to go up to the mountains, play those couple of games. We saw USC lose both their games to Colorado and Utah, so it's not like the easiest thing. My first thing is I said on last week's show that UCLA needed to go into Utah and get a big win because that would be the easier game. You know, Colorado's going to be a little tougher. Oregon, USC this next week is going to be tough. So they need to go into Utah and get a big win. They did exactly that. It was a good, balanced team win. Jules Bernard was doing well. Jaime Hawkins looked like he had regained his shooting form a little bit. It was a good team win. And then they go into Colorado and it looks so good for about 30, 35 minutes. And they just implode. That's honestly what it is. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. This team doesn't have that star guy. I mean, yes, Johnny Juzang is the scorer. You know, Tiger Campbell's the guy that's always leading the offense. Jaime Hawkins is your glue guy. When they had Jalen Hill, he was the all-around really good defender, and that's now Jalen Clark's role. Even though he did score 10 points against Colorado, he's more known for his defensive effort. But they don't have that star guy that these other teams have and thrive off of. That's with Stanford, you have Oscar da Silva. With Colorado, you had McKinley Wright the fourth, and you saw he took over that game. He said, "This is my senior night. I'm going to drag this team to a win no matter what," and that's exactly what he did. UCLA needs someone like that, and you know maybe that would have happened if Daishawn Nix would have stayed. Maybe that would still have happened if Chris Smith had stayed healthy. But this team, Mick Cronin needs to go out and get a guy like that. We might see that in the future. You know, Peyton Watson is supposed to be coming. But if this team doesn't have that star guy, they're not gonna advance very far. Basketball is driven by the stars. You know, we see Iowa with Luke Garza. Teams like that, they're driven by their stars. And UCLA really needs to either have one of their guys develop into that, maybe a Johnny Juzang, maybe a Jaime Hawkins, maybe a Tiger Campbell takes the next step, or Mick Cronin's got to find out a way to make this the most impressive defensive team in the world if he wants to go far in March.
Yeah, and I won't go as big in the high reaching like where you're going with the star player. I just keeping it on the Colorado game. They were playing really, really well for 35 minutes. And if you look at the box score, they didn't have a horrible game. I mean, they almost lost by double digits. They would have if it weren't for a late Juzang 3. But there was something that didn't check out. You look, I mean, they shot. Both teams hit 5 3, so it's not like Colorado took advantage on threes. They shot 46% from the field, and they shot 47. And when they beat Arizona State, they shot 47 when they beat Washington. So I mean, those are close wins, but you can win those games. And then Colorado, they shot 46%. And you look at Utah, they shot 45%. And the Arizona State shot 45%. So the percentages that it just not a recipe for disaster on those big stats. The difference is the turnovers. The turnovers, it was 6 or 7 in the final 6 minutes, 7 minutes. Tyre Campbell hits that 3 with 7 minutes to go and puts UCLA up 2. I know there were a lot of lead changes, a lot of back and forth, but that was a huge shot, big moment. From that point on, it was an absolute disaster for UCLA offensively. They took 3 shots in the last 7 minutes. And one of those was that garbage time 3 by Johnny Juzang. How do you attempt 2 shots from the 7-minute mark to the 15-second mark in a close, tight game? I mean, all the credit to Colorado. I mean, I know we want to bash UCLA for the turnovers and the inability to take care of the ball, and I'm sure Mick Cronin and his coaching staff will do just that. But still, that was just an absolute disaster. And the worst thing is, 14 turnovers isn't, or it's not the worst. They had 14 turnovers against Washington and they won. They had 14 turnovers against Cal the second time and they won. The Arizona State game, went to overtime, so more minutes, but 18 turnovers there. 14 turnovers isn't going to kill you. It's the timing. Most of them, I'd say half of them, came in the last 6 minutes of the game, which is, you can't do that. And Colorado, they wanted a 15-1 run when UCLA was up by 2 late in the game. 13 of those points came off turnovers. So you take a senior guard led team with McKinley Wright that can defend and convert on turnovers. That's a tough team to beat, especially on the road, and that's what happened against Colorado on Saturday.
Yeah. One of the biggest things, though, is this just what UCLA looks like against tournament teams? Every time they played a team in the Pac-12 that is going to probably head to the tournament, maybe head to the tournament, you got the 2 games against Colorado, they split. Each team won at home, but that second Colorado game looked really bad. They had the game against USC, obviously without either of their big men. Mac Etney played his first game, but then you had the Stanford game, obviously up in Stanford, and only a 1-point loss. But is this what the UCLA team looks like when they're going to be playing against tournament teams? Because if so, that's going to be for their next week and possibly the next month. If they advance anywhere in the tournament, you can't be making simple mistakes like this. And it also seems like they relied a little bit too much on Johnny Juzang again. He played great, shot the ball pretty well, but they can't just over-rely on him. That's when guys like Tyre Campbell get cold. Guys like Jaime Jaquez got cold. You have to do something other than just rely on him to win you games. Against Washington, he scored half the team's points, and that's great. He's an awesome shooter. He's a great scorer all around. But if you rely on him every single time out, teams are going to key in on him, and if everyone else is getting cold, the Bruins are going to struggle. One thing I did like from the Colorado game, though, is Cody Riley. I didn't like Cody Riley getting in foul trouble, but once Cody Riley got in foul trouble, Mick Cronin, towards the end of the game, went with 5 small guys. He put in Jalen Clark to try to shore up the defense a little bit. He put Jaime Jaquez, looked like at the 5, it was kind of more of an amoeba defense. But even so, I liked seeing that new look because overall this season, Mick Cronin's been pretty predictable with his lineups. I mean, you knew it was when Jalen Hill was still here, it was just Jalen Hill and Cody Riley switching back and forth between the big man spot. They weren't ever going to go with the 5 small, and they weren't ever going to play Jalen Hill and Cody Riley together, except for I think it was like, 1 10-second play, if that. So I liked seeing that variation from Mick Cronin a little bit at the end. Yes, maybe his hand was forced, but he's got to start doing that, start seeing if these lineups can actually work and play in these big games, because who knows if Cody Riley's going to get in foul trouble again. You can't rely on Mac too much down the stretch. He's playing pretty well, but he is still a freshman with about a month or less of college game experience. Relying on guys like that isn't going to take you too far at this point in the season.
Yeah, and I like the phrase you're using for Johnny Juzang is over-reliance. It's not his fault. When he scores 25 or more points in a game, the UCLA is 1-3 this year. It's not like he's only scoring that much because he's taking so many shots and he's taking shots away from guys, and he's not the problem, but his high scoring games show the problem in UCLA's offense collectively. I think that's where the issue lies. Meanwhile, you look at Jaime Jaquez, where in his career he has 10 games where he scored more than 15 points. It's not that many, but UCLA's 8-2 in those games. So, I mean, and one was the Stanford loss last year. There was the San Diego State loss to open this year. But other than that, they do well when Jaime Jaquez scores. So it's more when the going gets tough and when the offense isn't flowing incredibly well, they just feed Johnny, feed Johnny, feed Johnny, and you can't just put the game on his back. He played great in the first half. The first half of the second half, he played great too. And then they kind of just denied him the ball. He wasn't really getting good shots. And the rest of the offense had spent 35 minutes deferring to him, and they didn't know what to do when they got the ball in their hands in the last 5 minutes. So that's a problem that needs to be fixed. I'd like to think it will get fixed now that it's showing to be more of a pattern than an isolated incident. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. We're going to need guys like Jaime Jaquez to step up. Tiger Campbell is going to have to really command the offense in the final minutes. He's had games where he has done it. He's had games where he hasn't. That the Arizona State game, I think it was, or the Stanford game when he threw the alley-oop to Jalen Hill that just sailed over his head. Game shouldn't even gone to overtime, or whatever, or step backs that he's missing at the buzzer. It's tough. You need Tiger Campbell to show up in crunch time, and he didn't on Saturday against Colorado, and that's an issue.
Yeah, and like you said, it's not Johnny Juzang's fault, but the 1-3, even the one win was a close win over Washington, a 3-point win over Washington where he scored 32 of the team's 64 points. Just completely unsustainable because he is still a sophomore in college. Like a lot of these guys are, in their first or second year, they're not consistent. And we've talked about this again and again on the show, and we're going to be consistent with that, where we're going to talk about Bruin's lack of consistency. They just don't have guys that can consistently score big amounts of points except for Johnny Juzang. And while that's okay that Johnny Juzang takes a lot of shots and scores a lot, and he's pretty good at it, you need a guy like Jaime Jaquez to consistently score you about 10 to 15 points a game. You need guys like Tiger Campbell to take control of the offense and score 10 to 15 points a game. Jules Bernard had a good game against Utah, but then kind of disappeared a little bit against Colorado. That just can't be happening out there. If these guys are consistently hitting their season average, UCLA wins almost every time out because UCLA has a really good offense if everyone's hitting a decent amount of shots. Cody Riley's great inside. It's workable. It's workable with this team because they're slow enough on the pace and they're good enough on the defense to hold teams to about 65 points most nights. But if they start struggling on the offensive end, their defense just gets blitzed. And if that happens this next week, they're in trouble.
Yeah, and we'll move on after that. And speaking of not having consistent scorers, consistent offensive players, let's go back to that Chris Smith torn ACL. It happened against Utah a couple months ago at this point on New Year's Eve. And after that, UCLA rattled off a bunch of wins to start conference play. And after that winning streak, they've kind of fallen back. So, and that's coincided with Jalen Hill also missing from the lineup with personal reasons. So I'll let you start with this one, Jack. Who do you think UCLA misses more between Hill and Chris Smith?
Right now, it's got to be Chris Smith, just because of what I just talked about, consistency. Chris Smith was always consistently out there scoring. Last year, I believe he was the only UCLA player to average more than 10 points a game, and he really stepped up when it came to the end of the season, end of conference play, where they started rolling off win after win after win after win up until the USC loss. He was the go-to guy. And I think what they miss even more about him is his ball handling abilities. Because right now, it's Tiger Campbell or bust. Jules Bernard has taken control a little bit sometimes. Johnny Juzang sometimes brings up the floor. I think they were trying to run David Singleton for a little while there. But it's just not been the same. And Chris Smith really had the ability to take over when Tiger Campbell needed to sit and give them a little bit more depth. Obviously, Jalen Clark has stepped up more since he's gone out, but Jalen Clark is not the same type of player. Jalen Clark is a defensive specialist. He is, while he did hit those game-winning free throws a couple weeks ago and he scored 10 points against Colorado, he's just not the same kind of player. And if Chris Smith was still there, they'd have a long guy in defense. They could possibly give Cody Riley and Jalen Hill a rest, have him play the 5, and they would have a consistent score on the other side. So they didn't have to. Guys like Johnny Juzang would benefit so much if Chris Smith was on the floor right now, because teams would have to watch out for him, a 6'9" guard forward. They called him a guard, but he is a guard forward. But if Chris Smith was out on the floor, Johnny Juzang would have so much more room. Teams wouldn't be able to key on him, and we might see him score more points if Chris Smith was out there.
Yeah, maybe. I'm going to say Jalen Hill, and I want to preface that by saying I don't think that it's not that UCLA doesn't miss Chris Smith. He was very important down the stretch last year. However, I feel like a lot of the importance of Chris Smith and the importance everyone placed on Chris Smith was seeing that he won Pac-12 Most Improved Player last year, and then expecting another leap from him this year, a leap that he didn't really seem to take. He started all 8 games that he played in earlier in the season, and his stats were pretty much the same. His offensive rating was about the same. If you look at the advanced stats, his player efficiency rating only went up by less than 1 point. His effective field goal percentage is exactly the same. Usage percentage is about the same. So he was pretty much the same player he was last year, and he wasn't really a top 5 player in the conference. He was really good, and UCLA needed him, and they would be playing a lot better if they had him. However, you look at Jalen Hill, but when he went out, and he still does, he has the best offensive rating on the team. He has the best defensive rating on the team. It means UCLA scores more points per 100% per 100 possessions when he's on the court, and they hold their opponents to the fewest points per 100 possessions when he's on the court. So you take his defense, his importance in the rotation. That's why I think that UCLA is missing him more. Mac Etienne's played pretty well. He didn't really play a lot against Colorado because whatever it is, the muscle, the weight's not there to play against big bodies like Batty at Colorado. But I mean, Kenny Nwuba should not really be getting minutes, and he has been. And that's because Cody Riley's been in foul trouble. And that's because Jalen Hill has been out and hasn't been able to join the team. And I think that's messing with Cronin's rotations. It's good to have the 5 small guys out there when Jalen Clark goes out there. That's a good lineup. It's fun to watch. It's dynamic. It's pretty good at defense. But Jalen Hill is your best defender. He's your most efficient offensive player. And you're just going to miss that greatly when you're playing these bigger, tougher teams with NBA talent that are going to the tournament. That's when you need Jalen Hill. That's when you need an anchor in the middle. That's when you need someone who Tiger Campbell can throw lobs to. That's when you need a shot blocker. All of these things that Jalen Hill can do and has done in the past, that's what UCLA is missing the most.
I understand that. And UCLA has been really good in these closing situations, especially with Jalen Hill early on in conference play, where it seemed like every game was coming down to a couple possessions at the end. But you wouldn't see UCLA go 7 minutes without scoring a basket with Chris Smith on the court. He would single-handedly change that with whether it's a dunk, whether it's a three-pointer, just controlling the offense, something. He would create something because no one else on this team really creates their own shot quite that well. Tiger Campbell is all right at it, but even then he's hesitant on the trigger sometimes. Johnny Juzang can do it, but like we've discussed before, he doesn't really drive to the basket enough. He's pretty short compared to a lot of guys out there, especially for his position. And that's okay. He doesn't need to be that tall, and he's a great outside. But if his shots aren't falling, there's nothing you can really do about that within one game. But Chris Smith would be the guy that could go out there, create his own shot, and put UCLA on his back. Jalen Hill can't really do that. And I understand that's not Jalen Hill's role. That's not his position. But a guy like Chris Smith would have stopped that Colorado run. A guy like Chris Smith would have put that team on his back, put in that veteran leadership that this team is missing, because still is the only senior on the roster, and really take them to the next level. This is a good UCLA team, but with Chris Smith in the lineup, they are a really good UCLA team.
Yeah, Chris Smith is a good centerpiece for this team. I agree, but there are alternatives, and you just ran through a bunch of them. Whether it's Jules Bernard, who has a good game against Utah, Johnny Juzang can go off for 25 points. Jaime Jaquez can go off on his birthday like he did against Arizona. That's the thing. When you're so deep at the wing position, even Jalen Clark, who's a freshman and isn't a scorer, but comes in and plays good defense, can fight for rebounds, you can replace that production. You have to spread it out. That's what we're talking about when the team doesn't really have a go-to guys, because you have to replace Christmas production by spreading it out between Bernard, Singleton, Juzang, Jaquez, Clark, Kyman. But if you split that missing production between 6 guys, it's easier to make it up because you're giving them more minutes. You can switch out here and there. When you're missing one guy, Jalen Hill, and your replacement is a freshman who isn't even a freshman, he's a high school senior, Mac Etienne, that's not really a recipe for success. When he's your best defensive player, when he's your most efficient offensive player, when the offense has been proven statistically to run the best when he's on the court, you're missing him in the middle. That's not what you're looking for. That's not what you want. Obviously, both of them are sorely missed, and I don't think it's too bold to say that UCLA, maybe if they had both of them throughout the season, let's say they beat Stanford, let's say they beat Colorado, maybe they take that Washington State game, and the USC game's the only game they lose. Like, they're maybe a 4 seed, 3 seed even, if they had a fully healthy, fully available team. It's kind of a bummer it didn't work out that way. It's kind of hard to play the what if game. It's not really too helpful, but it would be fun, I feel like, to see this team at its full potential with its 2 best players on the court.
Yeah, and one of the biggest losses, I think, of the season was that first game against San Diego State, and that's when Johnny Juzang and Jalen Hill were both out. If this UCLA team had everyone healthy, they're scary. They are ridiculously good. They probably might not beat USC on USC's home court, but I think they would be able to go undefeated at Pauley Pavilion pretty easily, like they already have been, and we'll see if that holds up against USC. But guys like Chris Smith, guys like Jalen Hill, if they were there, they'd take them to the next level, and that's what UCLA is really missing right now. I still don't think they'd be up to the 4 and 3 seed. The bias against the Pac-12, the recent performances by UCLA probably capped them at a 5 or 6. But even then, that's not too bad. That's not that much different. Being at the 6 seed isn't too much different than being at the 3 seed, in my opinion. Yeah, you have to play a slightly harder team in the first round, but the 11 seeds are usually either big Power 5 conference teams that have snuck into the tournament, or they're mid-majors that have been playing decently well. UCLA should be able to beat almost any of those teams at the 6 seed. At the 3 seed, they'd probably play a maybe weaker conference champion. Who knows? But right now, where they're stuck at that 8-9 seed spot, they're going to struggle. I don't see them moving off there no matter what happens this week, but guys like Chris Smith and Jalen Hill would have gotten them off that line.
Yeah, agreed. And speaking of this week, the stakes, everything at play. Big game on the road in Eugene against Oregon on Wednesday night, and then Saturday during the day against USC back at Pauley Pavilion. These are the 2 biggest games of the year for UCLA. Seeding's on the line, regular season titles on the line. There's a lot to talk about, a lot to look forward to, and a lot to be scared of from these games. So, Jack, tell me what you think the biggest storylines are going into these 2 games, and really what you expect to see out of UCLA in them.
The biggest storyline's got to be Cody Riley, seeing if he can really carry that position and stay out of foul trouble. They are so much better with him in the lineup than him having to sit, either do foul trouble or he's getting tired. That hasn't happened too often, but when it happens, UCLA looks much, much worse. Even if Mac comes in and replaces him and gives him a breather, that's fine. But if Cody Riley is in foul trouble and Cronin is forced to either play Mac, play Kenny, play 5 small guys, UCLA is going to struggle, especially against USC. So I'm looking for Cody Riley to have a huge game against Oregon and then be solid in the USC game. I think UCLA will split the 2 games. They'll go into the conference tournament as Pac-12 regular season champions because I predicted this last year and they were 1 game off, losing to USC, and Oregon took it. I believe this is the year that UCLA comes back and really shows that at least they deserve some respect. They deserve something going into the Pac-12 conference tournament and into March Madness, which it's not going to be a regular year. They're not going to have to travel. So they want to build some momentum before going to Vegas and before going to Indianapolis. This is the time to start now in Eugene.
Yeah, and I'm with you. Like you were saying earlier, they're probably going to stay as an 8 or 9, unless if they go 2-0, maybe they can get up to a 7. And depending on what happens in the tournament, they can go even higher or lower. But all things considered, they're pretty much in that low single-digit seed area right now, and that's probably where they're going to stay. So I just want to. UCLA has won 1 regular season title in the last 13 seasons. That's bad. There are 12 teams in the Pac-12. And for the early part of that, there were only 10. You have to, it's the stakes are so high for them. And it's not a huge deal because you could always win the tournament like they did in 2014 when maybe the team wasn't as good as they were in 05, 6, 7, 8. But there's so much on the line and they really have to. So if they lose to Oregon, they can beat USC and Oregon can still be the regular season champions. So they have to beat Oregon. I don't think they will. I'd say maybe 20% chance. It's tough. Coming off the road trip to the mountain schools and then coming home and then going on the road again. That's a hard schedule that we were talking about last week. Pac-12 really screwed them over. Unfair, stupid, whatever it is, they have to deal with it. And I don't know if they have what it takes to beat Oregon. And even if they beat Oregon, they can lose to USC and not be regular season champions. So there's a lot at stake. They could fall as far as the 4 seed. Who knows? And that's scary. That's something that UCLA fans should be afraid of, definitely, because you don't want to have to be stuck playing Oregon in the second round or USC in the second round of the Pac-12 tournament. Or who knows? Maybe if you get a bad draw in the second round, you're playing like a Arizona State or a Stanford that has beat you or has played you well. So who knows what's going to happen? If I'm going to have to make a prediction, I'm going to say they don't win the regular season title. They have a lot of experience in close games, so who knows? Maybe they can lose the regular season title and then string together a good run in Vegas next week. We'll talk about Vegas next week, but when it comes to this week's games, I don't think they end up winning both of them, which is what they're probably going to have to do to win the conference.
But even if they don't, this week is about building momentum. You build momentum for the Pac-12 conference tournament. If you get 2-3 wins there, that's huge for going into Indianapolis. Obviously, they've already clinched the bye, I believe, in the first round of the Pac-12 conference tournament. So that's huge, not have to worry about that first round game. Just build momentum, get something going. If you play Oregon tough, if you play USC tough, it doesn't matter if you go 0-2. Yes, it'll look bad on your resume and you might get stuck with a 9 seed. But if you lose by 1 to Oregon, 2 to USC, that's building off of last year. That's building off of this year, how you've played for the rest of the conference games. Maybe not against Colorado, but for the rest of the conference games, how you played well and really improved throughout the year, even without your best guys. Build and get something going before you have to travel out to these neutral sites. And who knows how UCLA is going to play there, but at least give your fans something to look forward to.
Well, in my opinion, a win's a win. So to come away with a win this week, you have to win a game. We'll see how it goes. Oregon game on Wednesday night, USC, Pauley Pavilion, crosstown rivalry game on Saturday. That's a big one. The Pac-12, road to the Pac-12 champion could go through there. We'll see. So to hear about those games, our take on those games, and the coming up Pac-12 tournament in Las Vegas, you can come back to our show next week. We'll be breaking it all down. But that's it. That's it for this week's show. You can follow Dash Sports on Twitter at Dash Sports TV. You can follow me at Sam Connon. You can follow Jack at Jack C. Perez. Thanks for watching if you watched live. And Jack, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Sam. Always so glad to be here with you.
Appreciate it. Always fun talking with you about UCLA. So with all that out of the way, thanks for watching and see you later. Bye-bye.